All right, welcome back to Module 8. We're going to dive into Step 4, which is long analysis, our due diligence period on the properties that we've passed through the Deal Spotter system so far. As per every module that we do, I need to give you the quick disclosure here. I am not a licensed attorney, accountant, financial advisor, broker, agent, or any other licensed individual. Even if I had a license, I'm not acting in that capacity. Make sure that you seek counsel from your accountants, your attorneys, all of those people before you go out and try to execute any of the strategies that I've shared with you in any of these modules, because your situation is unique. And so you need to have that individualized counsel from your professionals. I am just a student. I'm sharing with you some awesome strategies that I've used and been very successful with over the past several years. So let's dive in. Now we've made it through lead generation. Remember, you got to take massive action in lead generation. Generate a ton of leads because most of them are going to fall off during this process. As we pass them through the filters, first filter is seller desire. We verify that the seller is even open to receiving an offer. For those that pass through that filter, we run the math and the quick analysis step. And then we compare that to their mortgage balance for those properties that our offer price that we calculate in quick analysis is higher than the mortgage balance. Those pass through filter number 2. We make an offer using the state-approved REPC in most cases. Once we submit that REPC, then we hit filter number 3 where the seller decides, and they can decide that they're going to accept their offer. They can decide that they're going to accept your offer with a few changes, or they can just decide flat out that they're not going to accept your offer. At that point, the yeses pass through that filter, and we enter this phase of long analysis. So let's go ahead and dive in. I want to talk to you about due diligence. Due diligence is a very important part of the long analysis phase. The buyer's due diligence consists of the buyer's review and approval of the contents of the seller disclosures and any other tests, evaluations, and verifications of the property deemed necessary or appropriate by the buyer. So let's talk about seller disclosures briefly because that's an important document that you are going to need to receive back. So most states inside the REPC have some form of seller disclosures that needs to be returned to the buyer. The seller disclosures form simply talks about it's the seller's opportunity to disclose anything that they know is wrong with the property, and by law they have to disclose those things to you during your due diligence process. So usually the best way to find that document, most states have a pre-written document that just has some yes or no questions for the seller. You can find that on Google or on Yahoo or any of the search engines that you use, Bing, whatever you use. Go out and download your state seller disclosures form. Once an offer is accepted, they have a certain period of time, and that's one of the blanks that you fill out in the REPC when you're making the offer is when the seller disclosures are due. I usually give them 48 hours after acceptance of the contract. So if my acceptance deadline is 2 days from when I filled out the offer and submitted it, I give them an additional 2 days after that to fill out and return the seller disclosures. The seller disclosures are required by most states in the U.S. Your state should have a form they've created that the seller must fill out and present to the buyer within a timeline defined by the REPC. Remember that just like any other thing in the REPC, this has to be delivered to you in the same form that you sent the original offer. So if you send it via email, this has to be returned to you via email. If you send it via snail mail, this has to be returned to you via snail mail, etc. Most states' real estate laws allow you to back out or renegotiate a contract within a time frame defined by the REPC if you as the buyer disapprove of anything you find out about the property during the due diligence period. So if you don't like something that you see in the seller disclosures, or if you send in an inspector and he finds out that there's termites or that there's meth or mold or that there's foundation issues or that the roof is bad, you can back out of that contract for any reason. And when I say any reason, I literally mean any reason. Now, I should qualify that. There are 2 reasons in the state that I live in that you can't back out citing due diligence as the reason you're backing out, and that is finance and appraisal. because they have their own sections in the REPC that those are handled in. But any other reason, like if I decide that I don't want to do a property, it can be because I don't like the paint color. It can be because I don't like the weeds that are growing between the cracks in the cement. I mean, it can literally be for any of those reasons, with the exception of other things that are handled in the REPC. So make sure you familiarize yourself with your state's REPC, know what things are specifically handled in the REPC, and anything else is handled in the due diligence period, and you can back out for any of those reasons. So let's talk about aces in their places. That's a saying that I use often. I have no idea who said it. I didn't make that phrase up, but I love it because I use it all the time. Aces in their places. We live in a DIY society right now, and it's created this attitude that actually is dangerous for real estate investors, and that is that you can save money by going and doing everything yourself. And I don't like that attitude for so many reasons. Probably the most important reason is you're trying to save money by spending time. And if you really break that down, time is a non-renewable currency. You only have so much of it, and you can't get more of it. Money is totally a renewable currency. You can always get more of it. I mean, that's why you're here, is because you wanted to make more money in real estate investing. So spend the money, hire the professionals. I guarantee hiring a professional is going to be better than you trying to go out and do it yourself. They're going to do a better job. In the long run, it's going to be cheaper. Trust me, in the long run, it's going to be cheaper. Just make sure you put the aces in their places. And then most importantly, it protects your time so that you can focus on things like the deal spotter system. Going out and finding more deals is way more important than you being the one going out and doing an inspection on a property just to save a few bucks. It's going to make you a lot more money in the long run. So let's talk about home inspectors for a second. Don't go cheap. This is the whole point of the long analysis step, to uncover any problems that might be hidden to the naked eye. This will keep you safe and might even make you more money. We're going to talk about that in a second, because the long analysis step can make you more money, and often does for me. I recommend that you purchase every test that the home inspector has to offer: meth, mold, termites, all of them, every one of them. In addition to a standard inspection, which usually covers things like the roof, the structure, the foundation, the electrical, the HVAC, the plumbing, the fire and water damage, etc. I always like to have tests done for meth and mold and termites and radon. Those are usually an extra expense, but they're going to be things that uncover those problems so that I can calculate for them, because and the reason to uncover those problems before you actually transact the property is because you're also buying the problems. You're not just buying the property, you're buying the problems, right? And those are things that your buyers, when you fix up the property and sell it, or after you're done renting it out and you sell it, those are going to be issues that your buyer down the road is going to uncover, and then they become your problem. So we should know about them ahead of time so that we can calculate what it's going to cost to fix them and just nip it in the bud. Let's take care of it right away. So even though it's a little more expensive, it's always worth it. Also, uncovering those types of problems allow you to go back and negotiate more money. And I usually mark up the problems. So for example, we talked about meth in the previous, I think in the lead generation module. Meth is something that within certain tolerances, with certain amounts of meth in a property, obviously if they cooked meth in the property, then it's going to be a lot more expensive to remediate. But for properties where meth was just used in the property and over the state limit, that gives me a huge amount of negotiation room during the due diligence phase, where I can go back to the seller and say, hey, look, there's meth in this property. You didn't tell me there was meth in this property when I made an offer. I'm going to have to remediate that. Now, I know in my mind that meth usually costs me between $3,000 and $5,000 to fix. I'm going to ask for $15,000, or I'm going to ask for $20,000, right? Off of the purchase price of the home. And that may vary based on each individual situation. Maybe you can only get 6 or 7 out of it. Maybe you're right at 5, and it's going to cost you 5 and you get exactly 5 off. That's fine too. Just make sure that you cover the costs and go back and reduce the purchase price using the addendum. You're going to submit that change to the seller, and they're going to have to accept it. or they can reject it and you move on, right? But those things can potentially make us more money, and I would always mark those things up if possible. So let's talk about your contractor. Your repair estimate in the quick analysis step was just a guesstimate. And the reason it was just a guesstimate in the quick analysis phase is because usually in step 2, we're dealing with a lot of leads still. So we don't want to spend a whole lot of time having contractors go out and create an actual estimate for us. Number one, they're going to get tired of doing that for you, and they're going to stop answering your calls because most of those won't turn into projects. And number two, the amount of time you put into it, you want to get through that step as quickly as possible. But now we're in step 4 in long analysis. Now it's time to sharpen your pencil. Get an exact bid from your contractor at this point, and go back to your quick analysis sheet and update your numbers. You should be saving just by using the save as function on the quick analysis calculator. You should be saving individual documents and spreadsheets for each property that you analyze. That way you can go back in the long analysis phase and adjust those numbers based on new things that you find out about the property in long analysis. And that's going to be very important for both fix and flips and rentals. Now, number 3 is your property manager in buy and hold only. This is going to be important because you want to get an understanding of what your property manager's expectations are going to be as they're listing your property. So talking to them and have them go in and they can point out and say, hey, we're going to need to do this to the property. We're going to need to do that to the property. Things that your contractor may think are immaterial, your property manager might find those things important. So make sure that if you're doing a buy and hold, that at this point in the process that you have your potential property manager go in and take a look at it as well and see what they would need to do, see what you would need to do in order to get that property to a point where your property manager can comfortably rent it out. So let's talk about red flags. Your home inspector and your contractor and or property manager may point out issues with the property that you were not previously aware of. Make sure you understand the costs associated with fixing these problems. This will play into how you execute filter 4 and step 5 of the Deal Spotter system, and we'll get to those in the next modules. Red flags that appear during your due diligence and long analysis process don't necessarily mean that the subject property isn't a deal. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to back out, though it might. It could mean that you have an opportunity to make even more money on the deal like we talked about. Use any red flags that pop up in the property to go back and renegotiate with the seller. Just, use the attitude of, hey, you didn't tell me that this was a problem when I first made the offer, so I didn't know about it, and I didn't calculate that into my costs. So we're going to have to readjust. Again, always, always, always mark up the cost of those problems. That's going to put more profit margin into your deal. And if you remember back to the module where we talked about quick analysis, I told you to put your minimum desired profit there. So we're looking at base hits on every deal at that point of the game. Well, the long analysis phase is where we can turn those base hits into home runs. So, and this is how we do it, by renegotiating based on problems that we find. The problems that you find are leverage for renegotiation. So make sure you use them as such. Now review your findings. Your long analysis tasks should not exceed your contractual due diligence phase defined in the REPSI. So along with a lot of the other dates that you're filling out as part of the REPSI when you're in step 3, the offer phase, one of the deadlines that it's going to ask you to define is how long you need for due diligence. I usually put anywhere between 10 to 14 days for due diligence on a single family home. This is going to be fairly standard. As you do your first few deals, you might want to allow yourself just a little bit more time because of the learning curve. You may want to do 20 days of due diligence, right? And then close in 21 days, or do 29 days of due diligence and close in 30 days. Your first few deals, just give yourself that little bit of extra time to figure out this part of it. Just like any part of this process, and really any of the strategies I teach you in any of the courses, it requires developing the skill. You're going to not be very good at it at first. You're going to suck at it at first, and that's okay. Everybody does. I did, right? But the only way to get better at something is by practicing it and going through it. So in your first couple of deals, give yourself that little bit of buffer. Don't get frustrated with yourself as you kind of fumble through this process the first couple of times. You'll get used to it. You'll get good at it. Just keep doing it. Use the spreadsheet you created during step 2 in quick analysis to update your numbers, accounting for all updated and additional costs covered during this step. So that covers the long analysis phase. We need to bring in home inspectors. We need to bring in contractors. We need to bring in property managers if it's a buy and hold. And your seller disclosures. We take all of those things. We take the inspection report that the home inspector makes. We take the bid from the contractor. We take the reports from the property manager if applicable. We take the seller disclosures and we review those items and then update our numbers to make sure that we're where we need to be. And then during this time, we go back and renegotiate. You have until the end of your due diligence period as your renegotiation window with the seller. Once that period is up, you no longer can back out of the property. You can no longer back out of the deal without penalty. And you no longer have leverage to renegotiate. So make sure that everything is done before that due diligence period expires. And that gives you the leverage that if you decide that you don't want to do it, you can back out. If you decide that you do want to do it, you can continue on. If you decide that that you need to renegotiate, you can do that as well. That is the very thing that we're going to talk about in filter 4 in the next module. That filter is you decide. So I will see you guys in module 9.